der intensiven Zusammenarbeit in außenpolitischen und globalen Fragen. Wir haben unsere Position zum Austritt Großbritanniens im Grundsatz natürlich nicht verändert. Wir bedauern das, aber wir wollen die Verhandlungen so führen, dass wir eine möglichst konstruktive und enge Partnerschaft auch nach dem Austritt Großbritanniens haben werden, sowohl wirtschaftlich als auch politisch. Das hat uns geleitet, als es
both economically and politically. We were guided by the spirit when talking about leaving, when talking about the transition period, and in March we will deal with the issue of the guidelines for our future relationship. For us, as Germans, we would like to see a situation where we as 27 act together in these negotiations, but obviously bilateral talks are of prime importance in this particular phase and at this particular stage. This is a process that is ongoing. We're all developing our ideas about this, so we very much look forward to Britain again setting out its ideas. The speech in Florence was a very important speech in this respect, and we will obviously follow very carefully what other statements will be made in the period leading up to the March Council, and then we will also try and coordinate very closely on the future guidelines as we work on them. We would like to initiate those negotiations because we are under a certain amount of time pressure, but obviously we also want to be very diligent, very careful in working on this, which means we will have frequent exchanges of views. Looking at global challenges, we talked about the nuclear agreement with Iran. There's a very close coordination here and also a common position of the European partners, of Britain, therefore also, and of Germany. We also talked about Britain hosting this year the so-called Berlin process, so a conference with the countries of the Western Balkans. I must say that I'm delighted to note that, irrespective of Britain leaving the European Union, this perspective of the Western Balkans is seen as a very important one also by Britain in order to ensure a peaceful order for the whole of Europe. We talked about Ukraine and the conflict there and about how we can achieve progress there, and we also talked about Syria. We voiced our concerns about the situation there on the ground. Obviously, Turkey has a legitimate interest in ensuring its own security, but everything that can lead to tensions among NATO partners has to be avoided at all costs, and then we will coordinate very closely on this as well. So it was a very constructive talk guided by a spirit of friendship and partnership. So yet again, a very warm welcome to you, Theresa, here to Berlin.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be in Berlin once again, and I'd like to thank you, Chancellor Merkel, for hosting these talks today. You may recall that you were the first head of government who I visited after becoming Prime Minister in 2016, I think underlining the importance of the relationship between our two countries. And I think our partnership is vital in defending our shared values, our interests around the world. If you just look, we're standing side by side in Eastern Europe as part of NATO, efforts to reassure our allies and deter Russian aggression. Our armed forces are supporting the Iraqi government to liberate territory in their brave fight against Daesh in the Middle East, and in areas such as global health, climate change, clean energy. UK-Germany cooperation has shaped the international agenda. In our talks today, we have discussed the speech I will give to the Munich Security Conference tomorrow, in which I will reiterate that the UK remains unconditionally committed to European security and set out my vision for a unique new partnership between the EU and the UK on defence, information sharing, security and law enforcement. Because as the threats we face grow and evolve, our structures and capabilities must keep pace, whether the challenge comes from North Korea's attempts to nuclearise the Korean Peninsula or the Islamist terrorists that continue to seek to do us harm. We must work together and use all the levers at our disposal to keep people across Europe safe. On foreign policy, we already work very closely together, and today, as Chancellor Merkel has referred to, we have reaffirmed our commitment to the Iran nuclear deal and the need for full implementation by all sides that we made in October last year. And we agreed that as we continue to work to preserve the deal, we also share US concerns about Iran's destabilising activity in the Middle East, and we stand ready to take further appropriate measures to tackle these issues. We also discussed the Western Balkans Conference, which I look forward to Chancellor Merkel attending in London in July. But of course, it's not only in defence of our shared values that the UK and Germany rely on one another. Trade between our nations secures and generates hundreds of thousands of jobs in both countries, with hard work, enterprise and innovation at its foundation. And our proud history of commerce goes back to at least the 12th century, with the trade between the Hanseatic cities and English ports. And it's vital to people in both the UK and Germany that this shared tradition continues. And so we have referred in our discussions to the UK's vision for a bold and ambitious economic partnership once the UK leaves the European Union. Because I want to ensure that UK companies have the maximum freedom to trade and operate within German markets, and for German businesses to do the same in the UK. And much progress has already been made in the Brexit negotiations. We both welcome the agreement reached last December to secure rights for the more than 100,000 German nationals in the UK and a similar number of UK citizens living here in Germany. And we're now ready to enter the next phase of the negotiations, and our immediate goal is to agree a time-limited implementation period, with the latest round of talks between the UK and the Commission due to begin on Monday. So the UK and Germany's shared history, values and culture, I think, makes us vital partners and strong allies, both bilaterally and through NATO, the G7 and the G20. And we'll continue to work together to strengthen these ties for years and decades to come. Thank you. Thank you. James, ITV.
Prime Minister, do you understand your fellow leaders' frustration that 18 months after taking office you're still unable to say, beyond the words deep and special or today bold and ambitious, what Britain wants? Were you able to tell Chancellor Merkel any more detail today, or must that continue to wait for your cabinet colleagues to agree with one another? And Chancellor Merkel, did you again ask the Prime Minister what does Britain want, and did you learn anything today that you didn't know yesterday?
Well, first of all, James, we have been setting out, as I said right at the very beginning of this process, we will be setting out at different times the next sort of stage of the process. I've done that through the Lancaster House speech, through the Florence speech. Tomorrow I'm going to be setting out our ambition for a security partnership between the UK and the European Union as we move forward, and we'll be saying something in the coming weeks in relation to our future economic partnership. But what we're doing, the stage we're at, is first of all ensuring that we agree the time-limited implementation period. This was a principle that was agreed in the December discussions when sufficient progress was declared in that joint report. And then, of course, we go ahead to start the negotiations to looking at that future economic partnership. But it isn't just a one-way street. I think that's what's important. Actually, I want a future economic partnership that is good for the European Union, is good for Germany, is good for the other remaining members of the European Union, and is good for the United Kingdom. And I believe that through the negotiations we can achieve just that economic relationship, alongside obviously ensuring we continue to have a good security partnership too.
Also erst einmal möchte ich sagen, dass ich nicht
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm not frustrated at all. I'm just curious how Britain envisages this future partnership, and obviously we also have our own vested interests. As regards, for example, economic commitments, we would like to preserve this close partnership, and maybe both sides, in a way, are in a process of learning, of trying to find out where we find common ground. For this, what we need is a permanent exchange, because we sometimes don't know how our opposite number is seeing things, and I think that this is a very candid exchange that we've had. We need to have further exchanges, but frustration doesn't at all describe it appropriately. Two questions, Madam Chancellor. This is already your fourth press conference with an international guest within 24 hours. So does that mean that you are back on the international stage and try to make a mark after a period of absence, so to speak? And what does this mean for the Brexit negotiations of your being back on the international stage, being more visible? That's my question addressed to you. And a question addressed to the Prime Minister in very concrete terms, particularly as regards the German business community. There is a very great concern that has been voiced because there's a high degree of uncertainty. Could you say how you want to ensure German companies in future being able to trade freely with Britain and also vice versa, and particularly in the financial industry? There seem to be many open issues yet. Can you say anything in more concrete terms yet? Well, there are always, let's say, intervals, not only now, as you know, we form a government. I had international visits, for example, the EU-Africa conference or Davos. I've had, obviously, also appearances there. But when you're in coalition agreements and things come to sort of a head, then obviously you cannot host a foreign guest. But obviously the Brexit negotiations are something that we follow very closely, even as acting government, where we are in contact with those who lead those negotiations. The Parliament too is interested. We want to be an active partner. We don't want to delay matters. We've always been guided by the spirit, and I think we've been able to do this.
And on the second question, of course, the point is we're entering negotiations with the European Union, which will determine in detail the nature of that future relationship. But as I said earlier, I think it is absolutely clear that that partnership, that economic partnership, will be one and can be one that will be of benefit both to German businesses that want to continue to operate and trade with the United Kingdom and to UK businesses that want to continue to trade and cooperate with Germany and with other members of the remaining EU 27. And what we're looking at is, I believe, a comprehensive and ambitious partnership, one that isn't based on an existing model, but one that actually recognises the different position of the United Kingdom as we leave the European Union, recognises the close ties we already have, and recognises the importance of those trade links and those businesses cooperating that will have been referred to from German companies, but obviously is also important to UK companies as well. And Sky?
Prime Minister, you say that this is a two-way process. Do you accept, though, that it is for the British government to set out what its plans are and not for the EU to make you an offer? And to the Chancellor, what the Prime Minister just said is that she wants a negotiation that is not based on any current models. Is that not cherry-picking, and do you think you can accept something that is bespoke in that way?
On the first question, the point of negotiations is two parties sit down and talk about these issues and come to an agreement about those issues. As I said earlier in answer to the first question, we have at different stages set out and clarified different aspects of the future relationship that we want to have with the European Union. Tomorrow I'll be doing that very clearly in relation to the security partnership. And that again will be a new arrangement. I think that's important because we're all facing the same challenges and threats. And now is not the time for us to reduce cooperation. Now is the time for us to look to see how we can develop on the existing cooperation in a way that's going to be dynamic and agile for the future. Because as the threats evolve, as they grow, as they don't recognise borders, so we need to continue that cooperation and be able to adapt to the threats as they come. So I'll be setting out tomorrow in more detail what I think that security partnership should look like.
Also es ist nicht zwingend, dass ein
Not absolutely
Zustand, der weder bereits
It's not
bekannt ist,
absolutely a given that
noch
a
ein
situation that is
klassisches
already
Freihandelsabkommen ist, dass
known
dieser Zustand Rosinenpickerei bedeutet.
and
Das
is not yet a
überhaupt nicht.
traditional,
Es
a
muss zum
classical
Schluss eine
trade
faire
agreement
Balance sein
means cherry picking. In the end, the outcome needs to be a fair balance that deviates, let's say, from the single market and not as close a partnership as we've had, but I think one can find that. And we as 27 will be very carefully vetting that process and see to it that it is as close as possible, but that it's a difference to what currently Britain has as a member, which is what they want and what the British people want. But this does not mean that it needs to be cherry picking.
Also, hello.
Eine deutsche
Sorry, ja.
Sorry, one German question. Mr. Hüdig from the German Press Agency.
Können Sie vielleicht noch mal
Sorry.
uns sagen, was denn für Sie so die zwei,
Madam
drei
Chancellor,
größten
can you tell us
Knackpunkte
what
jetzt
for
noch
you the two
sind
or
in der
three
nächsten Phase der
remaining
Brexit-Verhandlungen?
most
Und eine Frage zu
difficult
Herrn
bones of
Yücel.
contentions are on the Brexit negotiations? And on Mr.
Yildirim
Yücel, Mr. Yildirim yesterday actually handed over an invitation on behalf of President Erdogan and has this already met with a concrete answer. And Prime Minister Ireland is obviously a very tricky issue as regards Brexit. The Irish do not want, there is not to be a hard border, but at the same time you wish to leave the single market. So how does one shape this border in an acceptable way? Your first question was, sorry? The bones of contention. Well, what's important is that on the day after the transition period has ended, all of those different areas actually work properly. So we have to be very careful that we have the right rules and regulations in place, for example, to enable tourists to meet, that planes can start, that we have proper health care systems in place. All of that has to be settled. And then we have to think of trade relations and services relations. Where does Britain want to participate and where not? All of that will come out in the course of those negotiations. So there is not this one single crux of the matter, this one single bone of contention. It's a very complex structure of negotiations, and we need to come to a fairly balanced approach for both sides. That's what I intend, at least. And on the visit to Turkey, I have taken note of this invitation. I also talked to President Erdogan about this, about possible visits to Turkey, or perhaps the Turkish president coming here, but we haven't made any specific sort of a decision on this.
On the issue of the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, the Irish government, the UK government and the people of Northern Ireland were all clear that there will be no hard border. When we came to the agreement of the joint report with the European Commission in December, which was the basis for the agreement that sufficient progress had been made to move to the next stage of the talks, we set out various ways in which that could be addressed. As the Taoiseach said on Monday, the preference is for that to be done, the arrangement to be part of the overall agreement that the UK will have with the European Union. That is looking at that new partnership where there will be a new balance of rights and obligations that we'll be discussing through the next stage of the negotiations.
So, nunmehr definitiv